Stay in your lane.
Welcome to the Mind Your Own podcast with Erin Sorensen and Sausha Durkin, where we stick to sports, except when we're not.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Own podcast. I'm Erin.
I'm Sausha.
And I feel a little out of sorts. I totally was like trying not to botch that intro, but I feel like we really inadvertently took, like really unexpectedly, I should say, took our previous episode off. For anyone who noticed that we didn't have an episode that wasn't planned, if you're like, where the heck was it? Like, don't worry, like it wasn't something that you missed. It was just I messaged Sausha that morning that we were supposed to record and was like, I can't. So it just was what it was. We didn't have a podcast. Life sort of took over. But I mean, we didn't get just like tons and tons. We didn't get like a barrage of emails asking us where we were. So apparently all of you must have realized why we didn't record. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a doozy couple of weeks, but Sausha, first and foremost, before I feel like I inevitably just talk about myself, how are you?
I'm okay. Mario was just over here by me. He has a donut. I tried to buy him the inflatable donut that looked like a donut, but it wasn't quite as big as the one that he has. So if you hear things getting ran into in the background, it's just the dog.
Yeah. Thankfully, Scout has already barked once at a UPS delivery person. So hopefully she's settled for a bit. She typically does that like whenever I'm on a call. So I'm hoping and I'm praying. I will say I had to record something last week, late in the week, and it was going to be like 5 minutes at most. And all I kept praying is like, please don't let there be any sound on the street of any kind. Because if she hears a door close or she hears the sound of what she thinks of the FedEx or UPS truck, it doesn't matter if they're coming to her house. It's like a trigger for her.
Yeah.
And I was just like, please let us get through these 5 minutes. And she did really well. She did wander through the background a little bit. So she just had to like be a part of it. She wanted to be included, but she at least didn't bark. And that was all I wanted. I was like, just no barking for 5 minutes.
Please.
Just please, I beg of you. Yeah. So for those who, I think, like I said, a lot of you probably understood we're very fortunate with the listeners that we have, that you have followed us on social media, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And because of that, you're very in tune to what's going on with Sausha and I, outside of just what's going on in this podcast. And for me, we unfortunately lost our dog Jax. It's been now just over a week ago. It was very unexpected. I am not going to cry because I will say it's kind of amazing how much like you don't think your body can cry as much as it does. And I have cried so much to the point where my eyes are just have like constantly swollen. They hurt. Like my eyes just hurt right now. And it feels like a really bad allergy attack where like, I'm just like, my eyes are like burning constantly. But yeah, it was a doozy of a previous week. I am definitely still not okay. Grief is a very bizarre thing. And grief is hard because like, I think where I'm at right now in the last week is I've sort of transitioned into this space where I start to feel almost like, am I talking about it too much? Am I annoying people? Are people looking at me going, it's just a dog? Like, why are you acting like this? There are bigger things in the world. And it's so hard because like, I am sure there are people out there who feel that way right now with me, and I'm sure they will continue to feel that way. But like the reality is most people don't. And it's just a mind game that you play on yourself where you're like, everyone thinks I'm annoying. Everyone thinks this. It's just the stages of grief that you go through. But the thing for me that I have found is like talking about it and sharing it more openly has helped, because I've heard from a lot of people who have shared different things themselves. And the one thing that like I think has been consistent across the board in the last week that I've heard from people is that like it doesn't, like the pain and the like the missing feeling doesn't go away. Oh my gosh,
Don't apologize.
Oh,
Don't apologize.
it's just so hard. I guess like for anybody who might be like new to me, I adopted Jax in 2012. I was 24. I had no business adopting a dog. Like I had absolutely no business adopting a dog. I like had never owned a dog in my life, just for full transparency. I had grown up with a cat, and I just, full transparency, I felt like when you graduated from college, you got your own apartment, everything, like the trendy thing to do was to get a dog.
Mhm.
So I was like, I want a dog. And my whole thing was, at the time before I adopted him, I really wanted like a husky. I thought for some reason that was the type of dog I wanted. And I still really do like huskies, but like, I'm glad that I didn't, because they're also little terrors.
Yeah.
Love huskies, but they're little terrors. And I had visited the Nebraska Humane Society multiple times, and Jax was there. And his sign always said he was a go-getter, but he was his sign said he was a go-getter, but he was always napping. And so after our third visit, my mom and she was like, I don't even care if you don't want to adopt this dog. I just want to meet this dog, because it says he's a go-getter, but he's always napping. Some of it is like, obviously, like he was probably a little depressed in the shelter. It was his second time there. However, Jax just also really loved naps. Like that was just his thing. When it was time to nap, he really did not care what you were doing, what was going on. He just wanted his naps. Like, so he was a go-getter, but like give the man his space to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I adopted him. And I mean, I had just started dating my fiance at the time. Like I just started dating my fiance. So like Jax really like saw everything over nearly a decade. He watched the ups and downs of my own relationships. He watched friendships form, friendships go, just go in and out. He watched just me grow. He watched me make mistakes. He watched me have success. He was truly like, he was there for like I'd say like, that was a really like foundational point in my life.
Yeah.
And he was a constant through it. So I think like to just now not have that has been really hard, because I love Scout, like for the record, like I don't want to like, I feel so bad. I'm like, I love Scout to death as well. I'm so thankful for her, but it's just like, Jax was kind of like a soul dog, if you will. Like he was one where I'm like, I won't ever probably be able to find a dog like Jax, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But coming to terms with that has been really, really hard. So I will say, like, over the last week, if you ever want just like a really like big reality check of like things that don't matter, this is just like, it's not that I don't like think that like football and sports and everything doesn't matter. They do. It's just like, it has really changed my perspective, where like for a period of days, I was just like, I don't care. None of this is like important at the end of the day. Like the press conference and what is said in them, like it's not life or death. Like it's not as big of a deal as I think sometimes it can be made out to be. And so I've gone through a lot of emotion in a week, and I'm like, it's going to be a while before I feel like I can like talk about Jax and be more reminiscent about like the happy memories than right now. I'm just like, so like, I'm just really heartbroken. And I like, it's just like, I have these days where like, I can like kind of talk about it and I'm okay. It's just hard. And I don't really want to dive into the specifics, but I know some people have asked like what happened. And like, the answer is just like, Jax was getting old.
Yep.
He was, 10 and a half years old. He just had a lot of things, unfortunately, working against him in old age. Like dogs, they can get cancer. There's all kinds of things that work against him. And he had a few different things that unfortunately just cropped up quickly. And I remember one of my neighbors, they lost their two dogs very close to one another. Oh. It was very sudden, but they said that where they're like, it just happens very quickly. It's very rare that it's like a slow it's usually once you find out something is wrong, it just happens fast.
Yep.
And I mean, it was like about 36 hours for us. Now, that's not to say like Jax was probably dealing with things. Oh, sorry. I have to like, my nose is just like running now.
Yeah.
Sorry to everyone for that beautiful like listening experience. But the thing about animals is that they do a really good job of hiding what's going on with themselves. Yep. And he like, I don't think he was in pain. Like, I don't want to insinuate that like he was living in pain, but I do think, things were happening with him that like we were just never going to really realize until it just was getting closer to his time to go. And it just everything I've heard from other people, like my neighbor who said it just goes really fast. It just like happens really fast. It was true. It just went really quickly. But, I will say he passed away at about just before 4:30 in the morning on a Monday. And the world was like really quiet. The one thing that really stood out to me, because we went and got my mom so that she could also be there. And I had these big visions of like how I wanted Jax's last. You think like their last day, I'm going to like have somebody come to our home so that way like they can be in their space, and we're going to like get them all their favorite foods, and we're going to like spoil them rotten so that they know.
Yeah.
And it didn't go like that. But when I think back on that moment, like the thing that like I'm really grateful for is it happened in the middle of the night. So like everything in the world was like, everyone was asleep. The world was quiet. Like there was nothing happening that really took the focus away from him and from us. And so I'm thankful for that, because it was a time, it felt like time kind of stopped for that moment. And I'm grateful for that, because there wasn't a lot of things going on to like distract. And I feel like it's very rare that like life sort of stops in that moment and you can kind of just like live in a moment for just a period of time. And I do feel like we really got that. And so it's going to take time for me to process. I'm definitely not okay. And I don't think I will be for a while. But it will get better. We're all dealing with it. Like Scout is processing it in her own way too. She is so sweet. She like, I think she looks for him a lot. She looks for him like when we come home, she goes to the spaces he was typically always laying in. She has kind of started to lay in some of the spots that he had always laid in, probably just out of like, confusion of like why he's not here. She only knew a world with him. So for her, it's processing kind of like what being an only dog is like, because she never knew a world like that. Whereas Jax did. He knew a world like that for almost 6 years before she, came along. And so it's definitely an adjustment for her. But I will say, like, because I don't want to just cry through this whole episode, but I will say the one thing that like has been very, I don't know, just good for my soul is kind of learning Scout. I've never spent time with her, like just her and I, like, I'm like, who are you? Like, what do you like? Like, I know you like tennis balls, but like, what else? And so like, it's kind of been good for my soul to just kind of experience her also, and just kind of learn who she is as a creature and as a being, because a lot of the things that like I knew about her were entirely because of Jax. Like if you had said like, what's Scout's favorite, like if I'm getting a treat, like what's her favorite? I would have said peanut butter, but I actually don't know that to be true. That was Jax's favorite. So like everything she liked and likes is very much because that's just what he likes. So I'm kind of like seeing more of like what I think her personality is coming out. And that's been good for my soul, just to kind of have that distraction and that thing to kind of focus on.
Yeah.
But to those of you who have lost animals, so many of you have. In fact, we received emails from both Danny and Erica, just sending us notes. Danny talked about how she lost her best friend in May, and sent a photo. And the thing that's so hard is like, I think about this. So she said Burke was her sole pet for 10 years, experienced medical school, residency, marriage, and kids. And oh my gosh, I'm like, this is so gross. There's a reason that this is not on camera. Thank goodness. But the thing is like, you think about like, I think what I've heard more and more from people, especially as time goes on, is like grief is something that you can't just get over. You don't just like, I think like there's no expiration date to grief. Like,
that's what I was going to say. Like my phone is still my background on my phone is still Jack and Gino. And we lost Gino, like you and I were talking, and we lost Gino very, very suddenly as well. He was our Great Dane. I mean, I brought him to emergency, and within an hour we had to make a decision. And that was almost 3 years ago, and it still hurts. I think that the thing about losing a pet, one, we don't deserve pets.
No, they're too good to us.
But there's just like that bond that I don't think that we ever can form the same type of bond with another human being, like especially with dogs. I know cats, and I like both, but dogs, they don't question you. They love you regardless of anything that you've done, any mistake that you've made. They're always there. They know you, I feel like sometimes better than other human beings, because there's just that feeling that they have. They know when you're sad without you saying out loud that you're sad. They know and try to protect you when they feel like something's not right. If there's an argument or something, it's just that it really doesn't get any less. It gets a little, like the pain doesn't. It gets a little easier as time goes on. But I don't think that you ever stop missing them, especially if it's like, you know, your first animal on your own. It just, it sucks, and it's not fun. I know that our Jack was our lab. He was older, and the bond that those two dogs had, Jack was older, like I mentioned, but Gino would come inside and like wake Jack up when they were trying to go outside, because Jack had started to lose his hearing. So when Gino died, Jack really went downhill pretty fast, because they had that bond together, you know? So it's just, I don't think it ever gets, like, the pain doesn't get less. But it's just really hard when you lose a pet. They really are your best friend.
I think something that like it absolutely wrecked me when Kyle told me this, but his grandpa had made a comment to him about how like it's absolutely, now his grandpa's like 96 or 97. Like his grandpa's like he is like just rocking it, like living just this long, happy, long life. He made a comment that like you should absolutely be just, you know, really sad because animals are children.
Yeah.
And I know there's always kind of a controversial thing where it's like, don't compare your pet to my kids. And I understand children are very different. I understand. Like, I want to be clear. Children are very much like in a different, but for some people, like in my case, at least right now in my life, my children are my animals. They are my pets. I literally like plan my day around them. I plan my, like, if I have to work too long, like it's like setting up daycare for them almost. Like how do I make sure that they're cared for? How do I make sure that their needs are met? How do I make sure they're happy, healthy, and well cared for? And I assume that's the exact same way I'll be with a child, is wanting to make sure they're well cared for, that they're cared for, happy, healthy, fed, like all of these things. And so for me, losing Jax is like losing a piece of my, not to be overly dramatic, but like almost a piece of my existence. Like, I have found in the last week, the things that like I had to wake up at a very specific time because he had very specific medicines that he needed, and those took time. He was also very picky about how he ate.
Mhm.
So like you couldn't just like wake up and like be out the door in a very, like you had to build in almost like a half an hour of time
Yep.
to make sure he was cared for. He had everything he needed before you could. That is something that for me, is comparable to a child, whereas
Yeah.
like this was a living being that relied on me to care for them and to give them everything that they needed, and I based everything around that. I based everything around him. Like I understand that there are a lot of people in this world that don't care about animals in the way that I do. I understand that. And I understand that there are a lot of people who don't care for animals in the way that
Yes.
I do.
Right.
But this is the way that I cared for my animal. This is the way that like Jax very much was a child. I toted him around. Like it was like taking him to grandma's because somebody needed to watch him today.
Yep.
I mean, it was, I could hear myself like all the time, like with my fiance, like just being like, he doesn't like that. Don't do that. That's not what he likes. Like he likes it. Like if you do this, like it was just so like, it's things that like you would do if like your child was like, they don't like this. I mean, I was always like, no, you can't do that. Jax doesn't like that type of thing. He would rather be like this. And it's just, it's going to be hard for, I'd assume, a long time, and you know, someday it will get easier, but I'm very much missing the things that like were inconvenient. I'm very much missing the fact that like now Scout doesn't have medicine, so it's just like you are going to bed and you just have to go let her out and then she's good. It takes a minute.
Yeah.
And that's strange. I remember like having to base so much of my schedule around the two of them.
Yeah.
And she's different as a solo dog than it is with two. And so now like my whole sort of world has been turned upside down. And like I said, when Kyle's grandpa made that comment about how like, I don't know why just having that validation of somebody saying like, your animals are your children. Like you care for them like that. I was like, I don't know why I needed that validation, because like, I think that's where I'm at right now. Like to go back to that, in this grief, I'm very much in a place now where I'm starting to feel inconvenient to people. And I don't think that's how people, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really actually think that's how people feel, but it's just like where I'm at in my stage of grief, where like, I feel like I almost have to suppress it and like make it seem like it's okay. And I think a big reason for this is we do not allow people to grieve animals in the way that we allow them to grieve people.
Yep.
And here's kind of the difference for me. When my grandma passed away, I was very sad. But we also had a funeral for her. We also had these moments where we were able to mark the passing of time with her. We had moments where family could get together and reminisce and sort of like you could eulogize this person's life and have this moment of closure. There's not a lot of that for animals. And like, it feels like a lot of times we're like, when a family member, and for the record, we don't even have great, like anything in this country. We don't have great maternity, paternity. Yeah. We don't even have great that, but we certainly don't have great bereavement. So like to begin with, like
you get a day.
You get a day, but even like with like an animal, when you ask for a day, people sort of look at you like, what? You need a day to like be sad about your dog? Like, what are you doing? I'm very thankful, for the record, that nobody at Hale Varsity, Hurrdat, or anything acted like that. Like nobody was like, I very much like, I told people I can't do it. And it was very much like, cool, like do what you need to do, like not a big deal. So I'm very thankful for the work culture that I have, that like, it was not an issue at all. But there is kind of this idea of like, it's just an animal. Why are you so upset? And we just don't have a great understanding, for so many reasons in this country, but in society, where it's like, people grieve all sorts of different things for various reasons that aren't understandable to you, and not shaming people for that grief, however it manifests or however they have to work through it. goes a really long way, because all that happens is then people feel like they have to like suppress what they're feeling to get on with life.
Yep.
And that is not healthy.
No, it's not.
Absolutely not healthy.
I will say this, like I mentioned, like I just feel like there's just a different bond with pets. For me specifically, like as everyone knows, I'm 37. I don't plan on having any children of my own. It's something I thought I wanted, for a brief period of my life. But it's not something that I want in my life anymore at this point. So for me, like with Mario, I'm like going to get emotional because I'm thinking about that TikTok, when you die, you're going to absolutely destroy my life. For me,
my God, that one came up on my, and I was like, why?
Yeah. For me, Mario, we've had Mario since he was 6 weeks old. So for me, he very much is like the child that I was home with him every single day I know this sounds crazy to some people, but like I was home with him every single day for the first year of his life. He very much helped me get through being laid off. It was something to focus on, taking care of him. So like, I'm kind of like a helicopter mom with him, because anytime there's even the slightest thing wrong with him, I'm like calling the vet. I'm like, oh my God, is he going to be okay? So for like that bond that he and I have is very different than what he has with Brian, my husband. And I just think that, being more understanding, even if you don't understand it, of people grieving pets. If you've never had a pet, it's difficult to understand, but, I think that you're 100% right. Like, you don't get that time you don't get a celebration of life. You don't get a funeral. This sounds morbid as shit, but you get your animal back in a box. And that's, you don't get time to grieve for that. And I just think that, just being kind, and like, even if you don't understand it, just realizing that if you don't understand it, that's fine, but just allow people their space to grieve, because like you said, like everybody grieves in different ways. It's just, it's really hard. And sorry, I'm just going to be a blubbering mess.
Say, like, I probably would have said I didn't fully understand. The only pet I had lost really memorably in my lifetime was the cat that I had growing up. But, I left for college. He continued to live with my mom. It's actually, so some of these memories come back to me as I like talk, which is why I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Jax, because I have these moments where I realize, like, Jax was alive when my grandma was still alive, and now she has gone. Jax was also alive when Sid, my cat growing up, was still alive. In fact, Jax even essentially met Sid. Sid was not particularly like thrilled about that, but like they were in the same house once to see if like, oh, maybe they'd like each other. And like, no, Sid was an old cat that was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in this giant beast being anywhere near me. But like, to think of like the time that like things have touched, because it feels so long ago that Sid was gone. And now when Sid had to be put to sleep, I was really sad, because I, had grown up with him, but I also was kind of removed from it because he lived with my mom. And so like, my grief was different. It was more of like, I still could feel in a way that like he was still in a way existing in a world that like I just wasn't in. The thing that I don't think I had ever experienced until now, and so I think I have a deeper sense of empathy for others that I will always carry with me, is to have a pet be gone that lived with you and was with you so much. Because like same as you, Jax was with me a lot, because my job allowed me to be home a lot, especially in the last, like, from about 2016 on, when I started to make some changes as far as I'm not coaching, I'm not doing this. Like, I was home a lot with him when, especially out of season, there would be days like we're just together 24 hours, like just me and him. And, when Scout came along, still just the three of us most days. Kyle had to go to work, and he went through, like I said, he saw a lot of ups and downs. He saw a lot of like good times, bad times, in between times. He saw my life truly being lived. And I always knew the day was going to come.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like part of me just kept thinking like there's more time. Like I have more time. Like even like when we first went to the emergency vet on Sunday and we kind of like had a game plan and we were going to come back, like I in my mind was like, this isn't it. This can be it. Like there's more time. There's more time here. We have a game plan. Like
Yeah.
there is a game plan here. And then when we had to come back and that game plan did not pan out the way that we thought it was going to, and it became a very quick, like, this is not going to work. And in fact, like, we have to make a pretty big decision right now. I was like, I kept just in my head being like, but no, hold on. Like, there's more time. Like, why would this be the reality? We knew, like we had plans, like this isn't it. There's more time. And like, I understand that there's like, you know, the 5 stages of grief and everything. And like, the thing is like, there's a line in Casey Musgrave's song where she said, healing doesn't happen in a straight line. And now she was talking about divorce, but it's very relatable because I think a lot of times with grief, when we look at those 5 stages, you think that they happen in sequence. Like you're going to go through this and then you're going to go through this. I have lived I am on like an absolute roller coaster. My line of healing right now is like all over the place. I have moments of denial. I have moments of anger. I have moments of acceptance. I have moments of like, I'm going through them all, but I'm going through them all sometimes in the span of an hour. Like they're like, just remembering that if healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in whatever form, shape it takes for you. And I think that's something that I'm having to kind of come to terms with is like, I think that first day, the day after, I kept like, that pain was so insurmountable. Like, to the point where like I was having like anxiety attacks. Like it was so bad. Like the grief was just so overwhelming that I kept thinking in my head, like, how does this get better? Like when will the date come where I wake up and I'm like, I'm okay. And I think 8 days in, that what I am now finding, it kind of to reiterate what we've already talked about, which this is another thing I've noticed in grief. I talk about things a lot in a circle, and it's okay because I'm trying to make sense of things.
Right.
But I have found that like there isn't some date on the calendar where I'm going to wake up one day and I'm going to be like, wow, the sky is blue and the sun is shining and everything is great. Because here's the thing is when I wake up that day and the sun is shining, the sky is blue and everything else, I'm going to think of Jax because those were his favorite days.
Right.
And he is now forever with me, just in a different way. And that means I'm going to be always cognizantly aware that like this thing, this person, this being is missing.
Yep.
And if I could like give anybody in that moment, like if I could go back like 8 days ago to when I was like grasping, like literally gasping for air and trying to grasp like what was happening and give myself like any kind of advice, it would just simply be to just feel what you're feeling because this sucks. But like, guess what? It's going to still suck 8 days from now. It's going to keep sucking. But the difference is the waves won't be so big and you'll start to you'll start to be able to swim. Yeah. And there will be times where your head's still going to go underwater and you're going to get hit by an unexpected wave. Like I was sitting in the press box on Saturday watching Nebraska play a pretty decent enough game against Ohio State for at least some of it. And it was like somewhere in halftime, I got hit by a wave of emotions and I was like, am I going to have to go up and excuse myself to the restroom? Because I feel like I'm going to throw up. Yeah. It's like, why in that moment? But it just was what it was.
And that's grief. I mean, honestly, in a nutshell, I think there should be something said too, to the fact that when you lose someone or something unexpectedly, I feel like the grief is different than when you're expecting it, because you have time to prepare to the best of your ability when you're expecting something. There was a very big difference in the way that I handled the grief when Gino died unexpectedly versus Jack, who we knew we were going to have to make a decision on eventually. It was extremely different. So I think that, the waves are always going to happen, but especially when it's really unexpected and you didn't have time to prepare yourself in any way, it's a lot harder. And I feel like it takes a little bit longer to go through the stages of grief.
It's so good to listen to other people too, for me, just personally, because I know, so Danny had sent us a nice email about Jackson. Like I said, thank you so much for sharing your photo of Burke, and just, that was very kind. And Erica also talked about just like grief just stinks, and how in my case, I'll have a chunk of my heart missing for the rest of my life. And it is true. It just, oh gosh, a lot of people knew me because of Jax. Like, there is literally a person who follows me on Twitter that doesn't live far from me and would just like literally get so excited when I'd walk by the house with Jackson Scout, to the point where like the first time she ever introduced herself, she was like, "Is that Jackson Scout?" And I was like, if we look like a 3-ring circus, 100% it's Jackson Scout, because like walking Jackson Scout together was a journey of epic proportions. The two of them were absolute little, like, excuse my language, but little, like, just little shits. Like, they independently being walked were fine, but when they were ever walked together, it was just like the two of them were just like egged each other on. Like, Jack's new Scout gets like worked up over other dogs barking, and so he'd get kind of excited just to like watch her get excited. And I'm like, you two are just little snot buckets. And we'd be walking down the street. I'm like getting yanked over by 2 dogs. But the thing is like, I kept doing it. Like, some people would be like, this is insane. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, you don't have to walk them together. But like, I knew that they liked to go together at the same time. So like, here I am out on walks, like just being like, looking like an absolute insane person. And so like, people would always just be like, "Oh, I saw you out walking." I'm like, "No, you didn't, because whatever you witnessed, I am not proud of."
Not walking.
Like, it was an absolute 3-ring circus. And so the other day, I haven't seen them yet, but like, I walked past their house and like, I only had Scout, and I'm like, that's kind of sad to think like it wasn't long ago that I, bumped into them with both Jax and Scout with me. And like, it's going to take time to like kind of come to terms with the fact that I do have that piece of me that I feel like is missing. And I do think like at some point I would like to adopt another dog for Scout, because I do think she does well when she has some like another presence. I think she is a pack-minded dog, where she does like being alone because she loves all the attention, but I can tell like to a degree, like she's probably a little bored. I think she misses like the other animal to bother. So at some point we will. And, I think when that happens, it's not like that animal is going to heal anything. It's not like that animal will fill anything. It's just that animal will expand a part of my heart in a different way.
Yep.
And that the thing that I kind of take solace in too is like myself as a dog owner, as like, I will be such a better dog owner to whatever dog I get next because of my relationship with Jax. He made me better. We went through, like, I told Kyle this story the other day. I remember one of the first times. I lived in an apartment, so I had to walk Jax for everything, which was an exhausting experience, because if it's raining, if it's whatever. And to be clear, Jax was very like, we needed to move to California, because Jax was like, his weather was 70 to 74 degrees, no wind, light wind at best, sunny, just perfect, pristine conditions. Anything other than that, it was annoying to him. He was either too hot, he was too cold. It like would literally make it hard for him to even want to go to the bathroom, because he was like, "I'm not interested. It's not the weather that I want." He was very much a diva about that. He just had very specific like asks. And I will never forget, like, one of the first times I took him to go walk him, I was trying so hard. I knew he needed to go to the bathroom, but he wasn't, because it was like whatever the weather wasn't great. And I remember I got so frustrated. And I didn't like yell at him or do anything bad, but I remember just like losing my temper a little bit and just being so frustrated by this dog, being like, why can't you just do what I'm asking you to do? Like, and just like, it was a moment in my life where I'm like, I'm not proud of how I reacted, but I will never forget looking down at him and his eyes looking at me kind of like unsure of what to make of what was happening with me. And I remember looking at him and being like, this is so unfair to me, or for me to do this to this dog. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand what I'm asking of him. And he's just trying to live his life. And at the time, he hadn't even adjusted to his life with me yet. So for me to be so frustrated and angry with him is just kind of a really unfair thing for me to do. And I just remember looking at him and being like, all right, I'm so sorry. What just happened? I can't promise it won't happen again. I hope it doesn't, but I'm going to be more in check of myself, because you don't deserve that. And I kind of at that moment acknowledge, like, this is Jax's world and I'm now living in it. Like, it's not the other way around. Like, I am now adjusting my life to him, not him completely adjusting his life to me. And because of that moment, I have found I am more patient with Scout. I am more patient with other things in my life. I am more patient with things that maybe had upset me 10 years ago, because I would just be frustrated by the way things not working for me and the timing that I wanted them to. Because of Jax, I am more chill about. And that's where I'm like, when the day comes that we look at another dog, I will be a better owner to that dog, like I am to Scout, because of Jax. And that's kind of a big thing to like realize, of like, he quite literally made me a better person.
Well, and I mean, if you think about it that way, that was Jack's gift to you, you know? I totally agree with you. Like, Gino for me was the first dog that I ever owned as an adult. I always had dogs growing up, but he was the first dog that I had that was both Brian and I's. Jack was very much Brian's dog. He's had him since Aiden has been alive. So with that in mind, I think that both of them, and then going through that grief too, helped me be a better dog parent to Mario. It probably is why I'm kind of a helicopter dog owner with him. But that's the gift that Jax gave to you was that. And I was like trying not to get emotional, because that's honestly beautiful.
I think when you start to like, Nick Masis, the owner of Muchachos, he tweeted overnight, like, he recently lost one of his dogs. And again, it's just such a difficult experience and such a very unique and private experience for every single person. But he had tweeted about like our basically dog ghost reel. And I am like not a big believer in ghosts, but I believe in spirits. Absolutely. I don't know what the world looks like when we're done here, but I absolutely believe something happens. Like, I absolutely believe that our souls go somewhere, and I'm confident that there will be a day I will see Jax again. Like, I don't know what that looks like. I really don't. But the reason I feel confident in things like that, and so somebody who hears this might go, well, those are all just coincidences. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, whatever. And that's the thing, is everyone feels differently and believes differently, and that's okay. But for me, in the last week, there have been these moments where like I keep asking for signs from Jax, but like the things I ask for are like so big and obvious. Like, I'm just like, I want, like, I'm asking for like things that like are not reasonable expectations. But when I start to kind of break down these little things that I've noticed, so the morning he passed away, I had an alarm set that was supposed to be when we were supposed to wake up to bring him back for all of his, like, to kind of get the game plan that we thought we had started. And that alarm went off, and it's not like it's like a song. So it kind of starts very like peaceful sounding. It went off like just after he passed away. And
Wow.
that kind of felt like okay, here's this moment of kind of like that alarm could have gone off at any time. And instead it went off right at this moment. Like, obviously it was a moment, it was literally set for a time. But I'm just saying, like, if any of the timing had been different, could you imagine if that had gone off like 2 minutes sooner? Like it would have been a very different experience. And so like, there's just a lot of kind of like moment in that like time of like, okay, this was kind of meant to be, if you will. And since then, there are little things that I have found where like I scout, like there's one, Jax, as he got older, stopped like really claiming toys as his own. It was something he really was more about when he was younger, but there was this one toy, it was an alligator that he did like typically go for when he was looking for a toy. And I had set it out because I kind of wanted to just set it aside. And yesterday, Scout went and grabbed it from its spot, which she doesn't typically do. When things are set aside, she doesn't typically go grab them. She's pretty good about boundaries. So that was already a little bit bizarre that she like went and grabbed it essentially off of my nightstand, brought it into where I was sitting in my office, dropped it by my side, and then just went off to go lay down. And so like, that was kind of strange where I'm like, why are you doing that? And like the 1 week later, and I'm promising people I did not set an alarm. I woke up at 4:17 a.m. just right before what would have been, you know, him being gone 1 week before. I woke up, rolled over, and it was like, it's 4:17 in the morning. Like how, like, what are the odds? And Kyle woke up at 4:25. So just like for both of us to kind of just like independently wake up, like right around the same time of what would have been 1 week. Like there's just these little things when I think you start to like just step back and appreciate, whether it's an animal or a person or whatever, there are always these little signs in your life that shows you that they're with you. It's just not in a physical sense. And that's hard because you want to hold them. You want to like, you want to give them that physical love that you're used to. But the reality is like the love is still there. They're just, it's different now. Yeah. And I think to answer Nick's question from Twitter, I don't know if like dog ghosts are real in the sense of like, I don't think like dogs are floating around our homes like with sheets over their heads. And I don't think that's what he's asking, although it would be very cute if they were. But I do think that like you feel the spirit of the things that have left, the people and the beings that have left you. I think that they're always there. And I don't think that's I think that's the case no matter how religious or how spiritual or how anything you are. Like, I don't think that I think a lot of things are independent of religion. And I think a lot of times it's just the spiritual being of like our world. And I have a feeling that there are going to be little reminders that are there all the time of Jax, and they'll be there when I need them in the perfect moment, and they won't be explainable. And some of them maybe I'm making up in my head, but you know what? So be it.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
You know, I told Sausha that we were also going to talk about just change in general, but like, I'm okay with not. I will just add this at the end really quick before we wrap this episode up. Obviously, Nebraska made some big changes to its coaching staff just a couple of days ago from when you're listening to this. It's not unique. There are teams across the country that are making big changes right now or going to make big changes. And the thing I will just say about that is just a reminder, regardless of how you feel about people as coaches, they're still people. And it's okay to be able to respect the person, even if they weren't the right coach. And I will say the four men that were let go by Nebraska this week were outstanding individuals. They were more than kind with their time, their thoughts, they're just good, upstanding humans. And they have families. In some cases, like I think of Ryan Held, in the time he was at Nebraska, we literally saw his family grow. We literally saw his wife have 2 sons, and just to watch that joy for him was really special. And so like, I know at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with performance on the field. And that's what this business is. Unfortunately, it's very cutthroat. It's very cut and dry. A lot of good people don't pan out in the way that you would root for them or hope for them to do. And it is what it is. But it doesn't change the fact that they're still really good people. And so I don't think I worry about anyone listening to this podcast, but I think, like, just as a reminder, always show grace through these moments, because a lot of people's lives just got really, really turned upside down.
Yep.
And that's going to be the case at Nebraska. It's going to be the case at LSU. It's going to be the case at many places across the country. And a lot of people are about to, like, find out that, you know, this world that they lived in is suddenly not there anymore.
Yeah, I think that something that, because of the nature of everything anymore, we have steady access to information at all times. I think that sometimes what gets lost in well, specifically football, because that's what we're talking about, is that things are ever changing. There's an ebb and a flow. And just please remember that people are human. They're not robotic. They're not caricatures just because they're part of a coaching staff. The reality of coaching football is that it can be brutal sometimes. It can be unforgiving, clearly. But just remember that at the end of the day, that there are human beings, just like, you know, people are attached to, you know, their Twitter handle. There's an actual human being on the other end. So regardless of kind of what you thought or your expectations or whatever, just be kind, please.
And if you can't, just don't say anything.
Then don't say anything. Yeah.
I will tell you, I'll give you one little story and anecdote really quick. I won't use one from this current staff like that. That can be for another day. But Mike Riley.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to share the Mike Riley story, to be honest.
Okay. And I want to just preface this. Mike Riley also, as a coach, learned and grew a lot in his time, because, like, there was a lot of things, unfortunately, coming from Oregon State where he had covered, or at least to an extent made it possible for things like sexual assault to exist on his rosters. Now, in his time at Nebraska, he spent time with Brenda Tracy, and it seemed, at least from an outsider's point of view, he really put in the work to, like, understand the harm and the hurt that he had not maybe directly caused, but had inadvertently added to by not, you know, being more cognizant of at the time of these things, and holding players on his team accountable for their actions. So I also temper that with this. Like, I understand, again, with any human on this earth, we all have different experiences with people. So I'm not taking away from that. If somebody is out there listening and is like, you know, I don't really think he's a great person. You know what? I respect, like, all experiences with different people. With that said, in my own personal experience with Mike Riley, so I was in a really serious car accident in February of 2016. And Mike Riley very quickly took to, and his wife Dee really quickly took to, like, checking on me. I received, you know, signed football from the university and all of that, like, kind of like boilerplate stuff, if you will. But aside from that, I mean, he went out of his way to contact me, make sure I was doing okay. When I did finally return to practice and then to, you know, the spring game, he was like, he introduced me quickly in person to Dee, his wife, to just be like, you have to meet her, wanted me to share what had happened with Dee and my story because he was just so moved by it. He didn't forget things. And the thing that I remembered about him is that he never forgot a name. And he was really good at, like, when you told him your name, he never forgot it. So he didn't forget details. He knew life events that happened. If he had heard that somebody lost somebody, he would offer his condolences. If he'd heard that something significant had happened, whether you had a child or you'd gotten married, he offered well wishes to you. He was just the kind of person that when he heard something, he remembered it and he never forgot. And then he always offered he made you a part of his life. He brought people in and made them part of his life. On the day he was, you know, fired, he held a post-firing press conference, which is like, to date, him and Doc Sadler are the two, when they did those things, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is just absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's why, like, all I will say is I don't buy the, like, an outsider can't care about Nebraska in the way that somebody in Nebraska can, because Mike Riley absolutely cared about Nebraska. 100%. And I won't hear otherwise. Mike Riley cared about Nebraska. But I'll never forget when that press conference ended and the cameras were cut and people who were watching on their streams no longer were privy to what was happening in that room. He went around almost one by one to every single person that was in that room and thanked them.
Yeah.
He told people how much he appreciated their time, their willingness to get to know him, to speak with him. I remember when he came to me, he gave me a hug. He told me that Dee was in the back of the room and that she would want to make sure that she saw me before they left. He didn't have to do that. He could have just said, I'm done with this place, I'm out. But it was a good reminder for me of the human nature of this, that jobs are one thing, but people are entirely more important at the end of the day.
Yep.
And Mike Riley may not have been Nebraska's long-term coach. You can argue whether he should have even been hired. All of that, I don't care. But it doesn't change the fact that Mike Riley was just a really good person. And I, to this day, promise you, if any single one of us ran into Mike Riley, and it doesn't even matter if you wrote, it doesn't matter. You could have wrote the most damning critical things about him. Does not matter. He would be so thrilled to see you. Yeah. And he would probably remember something about you that you'd be like, hold up, how do you even like remember that? Yeah. And that is something where like, I think when people kind of break down, when you strip away the job from the person, you start to go, okay, maybe the job wasn't right, but the person, that doesn't make them a bad person. Right. Now, there are some bad people, but like, exactly. This is not one of them. Like Nebraska did fire or let go or whatever, terminate or whatever word you want to use, for really good people. And
I won't share who specifically it is. Maybe I will at a later time. But one of those coaches, in my experience, is what like your encounters with Mike Riley. Always super kind. I only spoke with him maybe 3 times, but he still remembered my name. And so, I mean, I don't really care what people's opinions are of these 4 gentlemen, like in the way that they coached, but just remember that they are human beings. And I think that, I mean, I could say that until like we end this episode, like 14 more times. Don't let it get lost that there are people attached to the actual coaching. They are human beings.
Just based on what you said, I know exactly which coach you're talking about. Yeah. But I also do say like 2 of the coaches that were let go were former Huskers. So they also had dreams that didn't pan out at a school that they loved and played for. And I do also just want to point this out. Like, these are those things where like, I think it's free to be kind. Yes. Because again, just because it doesn't work out from a job coaching perspective does not mean you need to go and like slander people for being like whatever. Because one of my other quick stories that I think has always stuck with me is Mike Kavanaugh. He was Mike Riley's offensive line coach. When he arrived at Nebraska, and I think some people knew this, but I don't know how many people, he grew up idolizing Milt Tenopir. Like Milt Tenopir, who is a just offensive coach legend at Nebraska, the man behind the pipeline. Like you think of Nebraska's pipeline, you think of Milt. For Mike Kavanaugh, he idolized Milt. Like when he was like growing up, like that's who he wanted to be. He wanted to be Milt. So for him to get the job at Nebraska, to be the offensive line coach at Nebraska was like, this is the dream. This is what I have wanted. And so for him, for that not to work out was devastating and heartbreaking because this was this thing that he had dreamed of. And again, I never would tell somebody like, you can be frustrated by like, I didn't think the like offensive line played as well or whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean that like Mike Kavanaugh was a bad person. And in fact, he cared immensely about it and it meant a lot to him. So I think when we can kind of start to dial some of those things back where you start to realize like, when you start to go like, just because a person didn't work out in a certain position doesn't mean I have to go and like just completely like just destroy their name in the process. Right. I think you start to like realize like, I think this is maybe, my best example right now. When people are watching the Browns and the Bengals play, They're watching Zach Taylor. They're watching Bill Callahan. They're even seeing Troy Walters in the background.
Yes. Yeah.
And I watch Nebraska fans like kind of get excited about that.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. 10, 15 years ago, people would not have acted that way about Bill Callahan. And in fact, people destroyed Bill Callahan's name in the process.
Yeah.
Imagine just like going, it didn't work out. He's on to his next thing. We now as fans get a new coach and it is what it is. But like, you have to admit, when you see somebody that like was once a part of your program down the road, whether they're having success or you just happen to see them on the sideline, people get excited. And that's the thing is like, I promise you, people are going to end up seeing Ryan Held and Greg Austin, especially, enroll somewhere else where you're going to be looking at your TV one day and you're going to be like, wait, hold on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, remember, they're people and like, you can still root for success for them wherever that journey now takes them. And I just think,
don't let the freshness of what happened during their tenure here cloud your vision of what they're capable of.
Yes. 100%. Because otherwise it's just like not a fun existence.
Yes. 100%.
I think if nothing else, this podcast, we often remind you of just like, be kind, show kindness. I think especially in sports, there's a lot of tendency to see things. There's a lot of tendency to see the worst in things.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we take a step back and just kind of go like, you can absolutely, and by the way, I'm not even talking about like, if you want to be frustrated, critical of the decision that Trev Alberts made, that is totally fine. Like I am absolutely not saying that. Yeah. You can be critical of decisions and you can be critical of the people. You can be critical of everything. And like, you can demand as somebody who your tax dollars are going towards people's salaries, 100% be critical. Like politicians, coaches deserve you to hold them accountable. They know the job that they sign up for. They're making a lot of money for you to be critical. What we're ultimately saying is you don't have to disparage character in that process. Those are two different things. You don't have to take somebody's personal character down because you're frustrated by the job that they did or did not do. So again, I am absolutely not saying be mad all you want. Just also be kind at the end of the day to the individuals who have just had their lives changed.
Exactly. Mic drop.
Well, this was therapeutic. I will say, as always, this podcast typically is therapeutic for me. I apologize. I'm not apologizing for being sad. I am apologizing for like sniffling so badly into your ears. I could have been more prepared, but I wasn't. So that is just the nature of this podcast.
Right. Deal with it.
But we do appreciate you as always.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I have always wanted this podcast to show, and this kind of goes into that last point we just made, is like, we're all humans. And like, you see me show up to a press conference, or you see Sausha show up to record a podcast, and you think like everything is cool, like everything, but you don't always know what's going on behind the scenes with people, or you don't know the life that they are currently living or the things that they're having to process and go through. So I think just like being cognizant of that is always really important. Yeah. Again, it doesn't mean you can't be critical of things. It just means you don't have to disparage those characters along the way, but also just being kind to people and know that like, we're all dealing with shit.
Yep.
We're all just dealing with shit. And if you have recently or ever lost an animal, please just know, like, I am absolutely heartsick for you as well. Why can't animals live forever?
I wish.
I will give you one last quick thing. When Kyle and I were talking about like someday if we get another animal, he was like, what animal lives the longest? And he jokingly was like, we should get a parrot. Because parrots live for like 50 years. I can't imagine parrots are very snuggly and like cuddly and fun, but you never know. Like you never know. Like maybe you find the one that just really enjoys that. But they do like live for 50 years. So I'm like, yeah. Considering at this point, it would like outlive me. So, great.
It's that's a good. I guess I'm getting a parrot after Mario
Right?
Whenever that happens.
We're all just gonna get parrots. You're just gonna see a run on parrots at Nebraska Humane Society. Watch out. We're all coming for any of the parrots and parakeets and birds that you have that live for like 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like
Yes.
we're interested. But also, I will say, as much as it sucks that we don't get them forever, animals, dogs, cats, rabbits, all you name it, they do give us joy, a sense of purpose, and they last long past when they leave this earth. So
Yes.
I am grateful for it. It's hard. It's going to suck for a long time, but I will say it was worth it. It will forever have been worth it. So
yeah.
Scout is now coming in here to where I'm podcasting, and she's like, "What are you doing? I'm tired of being ignored."
Hi, Scout.
Hi, Scout. Well, we appreciate you as always. You can email us at mindyourownpodcast@hailvarsity.com. We love to hear from you. You can also tweet at us at Erin Sorensen, at Sausha72. She is now just bulldozing her way.
Hi, baby.
Hi, girl. You're so nice. But we do love to hear from you, so please reach out. We will get back to adjacently talking about sports maybe next week. Who knows?
Yeah.
We don't know. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. It's fine. It's fine.
We love you guys.
And we will talk to you next week. Thank you for always bearing with us and listening.
Bye.
A Hurrdat Media Production.